8:39 back on the Big Boy Radio Show. You're listening to Florida Sports Talk, powered by NBC Sports. Adam Reardon, Morgan Moriarty with you. Joined now by my good friend Danny Money of CanesInSight.com when you're looking for Miami Hurricane sports news and information. Great forums as well. Check out CanesInSight.com. Danny, good morning. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing quite well. Well, yesterday, it's funny, reading on the intraweb and whatnot, apparently Will Muschamp's very interested in having Miami on the schedule full-time, or at least having it on the schedule at some point. Listening to Jeremy Foley talk after last year's loss, didn't sound like something he was interested in, sparking up once again. From the University of Miami perspective, is that something that they'd be interested in doing, whether it be a home-and-home or potentially maybe neutral site games in Orlando or Tampa, something along those lines? What's the stance of the University of Miami in this ever-changing college football world where scheduling is now apparently an issue? Would they be interested in having a Florida-Miami series on some sort of regular basis?
I think they'd absolutely be interested. It's a great rivalry. It's a historic rivalry. So many families are divided along those lines. My own family's divided along those lines. So many friends are divided along those lines. It really was a great atmosphere at the game this year, probably the best atmosphere at a home game since Miami moved to Sun Life Stadium. So it really is a rivalry that is very interesting and unique to Miami. The question of whether it should be a home-and-home or a quote-unquote neutral site game, Miami would obviously prefer a home-and-home. A game in Tampa or Orlando is not going to be a neutral site game. It's going to be heavily Gators. Truthfully, the best neutral site, although there's no site available, would be somewhere in the Fort Lauderdale area just because that area is already heavily Gator. Of course, no stadium there that would be able to to fit that kind of crowd. So if it has to be a neutral site game, I think Miami would still be interested just because Miami's made its name off these kind of marquee games. The game where Miami went up to Gainesville to play the Tim Tebow-led Gators was one of the biggest games in ESPN history, still is from a rating standpoint. So, even when the teams are a little bit down, it's still a game that draws national interest and keeps Miami nationally relevant. So I think Miami would be interested, although they'd obviously prefer a home-and-home instead of a quote-unquote neutral site game.
Danny, talking about scheduling, ESPN yesterday released a time for Miami's first game of the season. They go to Louisville at 8 p.m. on that Monday night of the first college football weekend. Is that matchup exciting? Does it get players, you think more excited because you're on national TV? It's the only Monday night game. And give me some of your thoughts on the matchup just against Louisville, obviously making their ACC debut that night.
Well, it goes into what I was talking about with Florida. Miami really loves to play these kind of national games where they're the center of attention. It keeps them relevant even when the program is struggling. Miami really kind of was on the forefront of these Labor Day games, even though a lot of them were really poorly played with FSU. They were still extremely highly rated. Everybody saw them, put them on the map, kept them in the public sphere. So I think the program likes it, the fans like it. Coach Golden probably is a little nervous about it simply because he's looking at starting a freshman quarterback, whether it's a redshirt freshman in Kevin Olson or a true freshman in Brad Kyer or Malik Rozier. So it's quite a big spotlight for a freshman quarterback to make his first to play his first game. So I think that's something that Coach Golden's thinking about. But from a player standpoint, rarely do you get a chance to come off just a brutal bowl loss like they did against Louisville and then get revenge right away in that first game. It's going to be an interesting game simply because you lose Teddy Bridgewater from Louisville, who really was the face of the program, really changed the national perception of the program, and then Miami starting again with a freshman quarterback. So really it's hard to tell what to expect. Louisville obviously got the better of Miami the first time around, particularly defensively, which is what concerns you as a Miami fan, because a lot of those guys are coming back. Although Louisville did lose 2 picks to the first round, they still have a lot of talent that Charlie Strong recruited there. So that's going to be the matchup to watch, is Miami's offense, which is very talented, but coming with a freshman quarterback, versus Louisville's defense, which lost a couple guys and lost head coach Charlie Strong, but still looks to be a formidable unit.
Danny Money, CanesInsight.com, our guest here on the Big Boy Radio Show, talking Miami Hurricane sports. Up here, obviously, after a 4-8 season, a lot of talk about Will Muschamp's future. At Miami, Al Golden's had some good years. And for a fan base that loves national championships and conference championships and whatnot, Can you envision a scenario where if Al Golden were to win 8 games every single year, but not win the Coastal Division of the ACC, how long could he do that and keep his job as the head coach at the University of Miami? Would it be 3 years, forever, somewhere in between that? I mean, is the goal for Miami Hurricane football still to win conference championships and national championships? And if you go to bowl games every single year, even though they're lower-tier bowl games, would that be enough for Al Golden?
I think what you just laid out is kind of like a Mark Richt in a worse conference.
Yes.
It seems like to me. And I don't think that would – it certainly wouldn't fly with the fan base. I mean, Coach Golden really is ready to vibe with the fan base just because of how the end of last season transpired, both with the losing streak and then the flirtation with Penn State. So the fan base is already split on Coach Golden, an 8-win season, a season where the defense didn't show significant improvement. I'd say the majority of the fan base would be against Al Golden. Administration, he's in a little better standing just because of everything he does, how he handled the NCAA scandal, and everything he does with the boosters. He's just really excellent in all these kind of off-the-field things, and the program has been clean off the field. So he's in a little better standing with the administration, but at some point, people expect this program to win big, and they understand that the facilities now at the University of Miami are better than they were when Miami was winning championships. So, the whole argument that there's some sort of cap on Miami's success, there's a lot of prominent boosters. There's certainly a lot of fans that just don't buy that because they see how many players from this area go on to the National Football League. I think they just did a study that showed in the last 3 years, 7.5% of all players drafted in the NFL came from the South Florida area. That's an astronomical number. And a lot of those guys weren't even recruited by Miami and really would have killed for a Miami offer, starting with Ryan Shazier, who went 15th to Pittsburgh this year. So, the idea that Miami can't perform better than that level, the fans don't accept it, and a lot of the big boosters don't accept it. So can Coach Golden, does he have a couple of years as he breaks in a freshman quarterback? I think that's just realistic. I think he will, get that kind of leash if the team shows progress in other areas, particularly on defense. But if you see the same things happening again and again, I think the leash would eventually run out.
Danny, looking at Miami's schedule, obviously they open what we talked about before at Louisville. They go at Nebraska week 4. Then they get UNC at home, FSU at home. Realistically, how do you see this schedule, shaking out for Miami this year?
Before the season, before the spring, I thought the schedule played out great for Miami because, those were winnable games. They were still tough games. A Louisville team with a new quarterback, a Nebraska team that hasn't been, any kind of powerhouse. I thought those were very winnable games and would allow Miami to make a run, kind of like it did last year, where it got off to that great start and was ranked in the top 10, before taking on FSU. With the injury to Ryan Williams, you have the additional complication of having to take a true freshman on the road to Louisville and to Nebraska, two programs that have been defensive-minded the last few years. So that's the concern from Miami as we stand right here. I can't imagine they take all of those games simply because a freshman quarterback is going to take lumps. And it could go downhill. I mean, depending on how that first game goes, that's going to be a real tone setter for the program, considering how the last Louisville game ended. So, it could go really, really badly. They could lose both games, Louisville and Nebraska, and they have a fight on their hands against North Carolina, a team a lot of people are picking to win the Coastal because they have the most stability at the quarterback position in the division. So, it's with the injury to Ryan Williams, that schedule's looking a lot more daunting than it might have looked 5 months ago.
Hey, Danny, let me go back to the coaching situation. You were talking about Al Golden losing. I mean, that there's got to be some improvement on defense. In your opinion, in being around this program, being around Coach Golden, knowing the relationship he has with Coach D'Onofrio, if there were ever an ultimatum, if there were ever all right, the defense didn't get any better this year. This is the umpteenth year in a row that, just defensively, we're not playing Miami Hurricane defense, and we believe that with the guys that we have on the roster, we have the sort of guys to play that way. If they were ever to give him an ultimatum, do you think he would fire Mark D'Onofrio before he would step away from the University of Miami, or are they a package deal?
That's the million-dollar question. You ask different people, you get different answers. I think the real issue with Coach Golden and Coach D'Onofrio is not the fact that they're good friends, which they are. It's that Coach Golden and Coach D'Onofrio run the same defense. They are philosophically aligned in the defense they play. So when the defense fails, it's not just Coach D'Onofrio failing, it's Coach Golden failing. And I think he just, partly as a friend, partly just trying to, show some honor, if you will, says, I can't scapegoat this guy for every failure on defense when I'm sitting there right with him putting together this defensive plan. I think in his heart he knows that if the defense doesn't work, he's as much responsible as Coach D'Onofrio is responsible. So the question is, when it's time to save his own skin, would he throw his friend under the bus for something that he's equally responsible for? And I can't answer that, but I do know that this defense is not something that Coach D'Onofrio brought in from elsewhere. If it was, a friend that he might have had in another program that brought in his own defense, it's easier to say, we gave you a shot, it's just not working here. But when it's something that you are so